Français. Okay. Bonjour. Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 3 of a call to action centering Indigenous methodologies and approaches. Today, we will be workshopping, and I am pleased that I am joined by a fellow co-host, Mandy Penny. She is the lead educational developer for digital pedagogies and writing across the curriculum. And so yesterday we talked a little bit about the social location wheel. Some of you did not know about the social location wheel. And this is really important for indigenizing pedagogies and curricula, and it's also important for decolonizing. So before we start, my name is Andrea Menard, and I am the lead educational developer of indigenizing pedagogies and curricula at CTL. And I am a white passing Métis person and an intergenerational residential day Roman Catholic school survivor, originally from the abolished Red River settlement. These sessions are about how to localize Indigenous knowledge and why it is important to do so. I called the 3 sessions a call to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, a document I heavily rely on in order to change things for the better. I outlined that there are 19 calls to action to take part in, but really all the calls to action are relative. So Mandy will be first, and she will facilitate the social location wheel. And we will do a Padlet at the end of the social location wheel. And then we'll do a role play that I will be facilitating, and we'll do Mentimeter questions after the role play. So I'm queuing you up for the Mentimeter. So Mandy, I'm so pleased you could join me today on short notice. Welcome to WOW.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I had a chance in my session with Del Beer on student reflection to talk about social location, and I know it came up in your session yesterday as well. And I think it's always just really useful. Folks in the audience, you may or may not have had an opportunity to engage in a social location exercise. And while I typically would allot, perhaps half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour for this, I just wanted to give you a little sense of how these exercises work in groups, how they've been done in classes and in training and professional development, so that we can start thinking about our own identities and the communities and demographics to which we belong. And the idea here, of course, is that if, especially those of us who are settlers, if we want to think about how we are going to engage in a process of indigenization and decolonization, and how to approach our classrooms in good and healthy and respectful ways, then we also have to understand a little bit of how we have come to be who we are. And that means analyzing, too, our relationship with power and privilege and marginalization and oppression. And our identities are necessarily quite complex, right? There are aspects of ourselves that are more or less visible on our bodies. And some parts of our own social location can shift over time. For example, here I'm thinking about things like class, obviously age, perhaps religious or spiritual affiliation, while other parts not as much. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pop in the chat right now a copy of a PDF from the University of Michigan, who has at their Center for Teaching and Learning, they have some great resources on incorporating social location in classrooms. And I'm going to take you through this exercise. So what we're going to do first is we're going to give everyone about 10 to 15 minutes to engage in this wheel on your own and privately. And I just want to emphasize at the outset that nobody in the group is ever going to be asked at any time to share private information of yourselves that you do not wish to disclose. And that would go the same for in our classrooms, right? When we're asking students to engage in this kind of reflection, we have to remember that there are students in our classes who have experienced barriers to their education and their lives more broadly, and who are impacted by systemic racism, by misogyny, by homophobia, and so on. And so I will be asking you to engage with the wheel privately, but what you choose to share in the Padlet afterwards about yourself is up to you. So you can speak to the questions that I'm going to ask either specifically in relation to your own identity or more broadly in terms of thinking about how these kinds of reflective activities can work. So in the PDF that I've shared with all of you, you're going to first see a wheel with a number of categories around the circle that you're asked to sort of fill in. And so here, starting at the top and working in a clockwise way, we have ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender, sex, sexual orientation, national origin, first language, physical, emotional, or developmental disability, age, religious or spiritual affiliation, and race. Okay, so to the best of your abilities, you're going to fill these in with how you understand your own identity, your own positionality. And then in the middle, once you've completed that, then you're going to answer the 5 questions in the center of the circle. And so what we do know about social location, of course, is that it can impact us in different kinds of ways, in different kinds of contexts. So the first question is identities that you think about most often. So perhaps you'll say, I think a lot about my age and my gender. Right. The second question, identities you think about least often. So the ones that we don't often have to think about much when we're moving through the world. Question 3, your own identities that you would like to learn more about. I know that when I came out as queer in my 30s, sort of catching up on LGBTQ history was something that I was very invested in. Number 4, identities that have the strongest effect on how you perceive yourself. And number 5, identities that have the greatest effect on how others perceive you. Okay, so we're going to give you about 15 minutes. I'll probably check in around the 10-minute mark to see how folks are doing. If you have any questions or concerns, or you're unfamiliar with any of the language, you could certainly reach out to either myself or Andrea via private message, and we can support you with that. But we'll give you 15 minutes now to just work on your own to fill this out. Okay, everyone. So that is the 15 minutes. Thanks so much for taking the time to sit with the exercise yourselves. I'll share a little bit after the Padlet, just very briefly, the primary ways that I have integrated social location into classrooms and into tutor training in my previous work. But what we're going to do right now, just to give everyone a moment to debrief, and again, I want to emphasize that nobody ever has to share anything about themselves that they do not wish to disclose. So you can engage with the Padlet questions as specifically or as generally as you prefer, thinking about it more broadly. So I put the link to the Padlet in the chat, and we're going to give folks, I believe it was 10 minutes, Andrea, is that right, to engage in the reflection questions. I'll read them out. And again, it's also okay if you don't get to all of these. So, focus in primarily on the ones that resonate most for you. And so the questions that we have in this Padlet, first of all, did this social location exercise resonate with you? Why or why not? Have you previously engaged with the social location exercise? And if so, in what context? What are the potential benefits of engaging students in social location work and reflection? And then, of course, conversely, what are the potential challenges of engaging students in social location work and reflection? What resources or support would students need or want in order to participate in an exercise like this? And also, because this is important to consider as well, what resources or further learning would you need or want in order to incorporate this kind of social location work into your classes? And finally, what questions do you still have about social location work? So this is your opportunity to sort of think through what you've just experienced, and also to give Andrea and myself and the rest of our team a sense of what you're all thinking about in terms of social location and how this might connect to EDI, indigenization, and decolonization work. Okay, I think I will bring folks back in the interest of time, and the Padlet is starting to slow down, but by all means, please feel free to continue to add here if you like. Thank you so much, everyone, for your engagement in these written reflections. There's so much here that is so important. And Andrea put in the chat that everything that she's reading is really resonating. What I especially appreciated is the repeated mention of trauma. Right. So having a trauma-informed approach to how we include exercises like this in our class, which includes, of course, thinking about how we frame the exercise, how we debrief the exercise, recognizing that these kinds of exercises can be challenging for students in a variety of ways, and that they need choice and flexibility in terms of how they engage, and having resources and supports in place for them. I also really appreciate the comments here about trying to think about how an exercise like this can sort of relate to the course in really obvious ways to make those kinds of connections, right? And so I've used these kinds of exercises in a few different contexts. I've used them with my student tutors to think about the way that they are engaging with other students in one-to-one tutoring sessions, right? And about the relationship between a student tutor and another student coming in for support. I have paired it with a reading of the TRC's call to action so that we have a sense of who we are as we start to think about our own ethical responsibilities in the process of truth and reconciliation. I've also used activities like this to sort of engage in disciplinary reflection and conversation about, kind of colonial histories and legacies within disciplinary conventions and the way that we do things in academia more broadly. And I have designed assignments for students as part of a larger, perhaps more traditional research paper, might include a section or some footnotes or a companion document to think about how their own process of learning within a course or doing the research and writing process is informed by who they are. I see Julie has a comment here in the chat as well. This is the place where I suggest that CTL specifically offer workshops on working with students who have mental health issues and about trauma, personal, cultural, and how to teach within that awareness. That's really important. Did you want to speak specifically to that, or are you good with the comment there, Julie? I agree, absolutely. I don't think we can do this kind of work without having a grounding in how this might impact students and how we engage in it in an ethical way. This Padlet is now available to everyone to kind of think about these issues. And, we do have Andrea Menard here as our lead ed dev in indigenizing curricula. We also have Everett Igobwa here, who is our lead educational developer in critical pedagogies and EDI, which will obviously intersect with this kind of exercise and how we talk about our positionality. So this is great. Thanks so much, everyone. I just wanted to give folks an opportunity to engage briefly in the exercise and to start to think about what this could look like in our classrooms. Andrea, you mean the link to the Padlet itself? Is that the link you'd like put back in the chat? Absolutely. I can do that. And while I do that, Andrea, I'll hand it back to you to set up the role play.
Thank you so much, Mandy. This has been very enriching. So in the Indigenous world, we always ask who we are. Who are you? Where are you coming from in a personal sense? So it's really good to do this social location wheel when you are interacting with Indigenous communities. But then what happens is the person goes on and on and on about their settler heritage. You have to connect the heritage with the content. So it's good that we've done this social location wheel so that we can say, and then I came to Canada, or, forefathers came to Canada, and this is how I've benefited from colonization. So there's a couple more steps, but Mandy just weaved through. We have a whole ton of things to think about, and I'm so glad that Mandy came in today. Thank you. Okay, so next I want to do a role play. So this role play, please play yourselves. So one part of the role play, you will be untenured professors from the city. The other half of us will be Indigenous or managers of an Indigenous nation. But I want you to play yourselves. You don't have to play a character or anything like that. So Graham will split us into two groups. Mandy will facilitate the untenured professor role play. And I've created a document that Mandy's going to read through, and you're going to play that part. I am going to facilitate the Indigenous manager part, or manager of an Indigenous nation. I'll share the document. I'll read it through with my group, and we'll strategize how we're going to answer each other, because we're going to go into small groups of 4 2 managers and 2 professors, and we're going to see how we can work together. I want the documents to be confidential so we don't see each other's sides. So Graham, any questions, please ask Mandy in her group and me in my group. And it's a low stakes game. It's just to get us out of our heads into something more dynamic. So yes, Graham, can you please split us? If everybody's back in the room, we have run out of time, and hopefully we'll all be back in September to discuss this, especially with the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation coming up on September 30th. We can talk about this more of how to approach Indigenous nations ethically and responsibly.